Our next guest hasn't been around that long.
Thanks.
No, it's probably, but you've been around since 83, right?
Yeah.
And he's the first of the guests of the Barnburner program that we've stolen. Colin Patterson, kind enough to join us in studio. How are you?
Excellent, Rob. How are you?
I am great. This is home for you, boy. This neighborhood sure is going to be something in the summer, isn't it?
Is it ever? There's some great little places opening up. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Not a lot of fun to be a Flames fan at this moment, but it was. I want to go all the way back because over last week, Daryl Sutter coached game 401, became the all-time leader in games coached by a Flame coach, although he did it in 2 stints. Badger Bob was the leader at 400. We had Peter Marr on, we had Eric Dahachuk on, both covered Badger. You played for Badger. 2 more different coaches you will not get in Daryl Sutter and Badger Bob Johnson, right?
Absolutely. I never played for Daryl, obviously, but probably would have done well under him. But did play for Badger. Badger was all hockey, like everything related to hockey. He had the greatest attitude about the game and about life. And just, he was a real interesting guy. He was all about developing players and developing the game.
He came from the college game, which you did too.
Yes.
Did it make it an easier transition for you?
It did, because I think when Badger came in, there was a lot of older players the year before, and they moved a lot of those guys out, and we're looking for, new players to bring in. And I was fortunate enough as a college free agent to come in in 83, and Badger, wanted to make me a player. And he did. I mean, he worked hard with me, and, people might have looked at it and gone, boy, I don't know what you're doing walking like a duck around center ice, but it did help my skating.
I'm sorry, what?
So he would get me you'd squat down, you walk like a duck, or you would call it the duck walk. And so you'd go around the center ice, around the circle, face-off circle. And I would do that for, probably 5 or 10 minutes. And he'd be sort of wandering off, thinking of something else, and forget you're doing it. And I mean, it's hard work if anybody gets down and does that. And it's no wonder I've got bad knees now.
This was like practice, or was this in training camp?
This was practice. This was after practice. Badger, one thing about him was, in the early days, he would practice. We'd practice all the time.
Yeah.
Like he'd practice on a game day. You'd be practicing an hour and a half.
Right.
And finally, Lanny went in, and some of the older guys said, hey, Badger, on a game day, because you're playing, 80 games or 78 games, whatever it was back in the day, we don't need to practice a full practice in the morning of a game. And so, he sort of let his foot off the pedal a bit for that. Okay. But, in those days too, the away team would come on after you, and, they'd have the ice at 11, and you wouldn't want to give it up at 10:30 or 10:45, and you'd wait till the bitter end till it was 11, and then you go off the ice, even if you just had one guy on the ice. And sometimes that one guy would be me walking around the circle
as a duck.
And I remember Dave Taylor, who, obviously the greatest player ever to play at Clarkson University. And
of course.
And so he came up after, and he said, what were you doing out there? I was walking like a duck to improve my skating. And he goes, oh, okay.
Yeah. Did it work?
Yeah, it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
So here's again, every time we have a conversation about Badger Bob, there's always 2 things that come up in a story. So the first one for me is the hour and a half practice. You guys practiced an hour and a half on game days.
Yeah. And what I mean, it was, after a while it got grueling, and especially, for a college player, because you only played, 34, 40 games.
Right.
The extra games alone was a lot, let alone practicing. And he was a teacher.
Yep.
He X's and O's. He loved the game. He was always studying the game. He'd always be interested in how other teams played and what they did on their power play, penalty killing. Badger was way ahead of the curve on that, on practicing power play and penalty killing. And his belief was, if we had a good power play and good penalty killing, we'd be up at the top of the league, and we were.
Right.
Regardless of your 5-on-5 play, which we were pretty good, but those 2 things. And he had this drill. It was called Joker's Wild. It was my favorite drill. It was, you had 4 guys in, red, 4 guys in white, and then you had the guy who was a joker, which typically was Al McInnes, to be, whether he had a black jersey on or an orange one, he would be on the power play the whole time. So you go basically a minute on power play penalty killing, and then it would reverse. So the guys in the penalty kill would go on the power play, and you go back and forth, and it was a hard paced drill, and it was really good drill. And always thought that was, one of his gifts to the game was the power play penalty killing and in that aspect. But he was also huge in nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah, he was.
Physical conditioning. We used to ride the bike after the game. I used to say, not that you can use his name anymore, but I rode more miles than Lance Armstrong after a game. And then, nutrition. We had people come in to talk about nutrition to us. We had a yoga instructor come in, and all those things. It was great. He was way out in front of that, although we probably weren't as accepting of that at the time. And even the sports psychologist, that type of stuff was big for Badger.
Tell me about the yoga, because I think you just kind of alluded to it. In hindsight now, it was a great innovation. At the time, not so much. Right?
Yeah, not so much of the time. And you can imagine going back in the day for the guys, hurry up, we got to get out for lunch and have a burger and a beer. But this lady, Shirley Johansson, would come in, and she would get us all. We'd be in the workout room, and we all be out, and she'd be stretching us, and she had this real calming voice, like any yoga instructor. She, relax your quads, relax your shoulders, let your neck sink in deep into the carpet, and then relax your buttocks, and and all this stuff, right? So she doesn't show up one day, and so Bearcat, of course, he's been reading the yoga books, and so he takes over, and he's like, okay, relax your legs, relax your arse, guys, and that was it. Bearcat's time as the yoga instructor ended then. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Just one more on Badger, and that has to do with his, goal was, and Pete talked about it, was always about Edmonton, right? Like, got to get the Oilers, got to knock them off the top of the mountain, right? Yeah,
knock them off the top of the mountain. And, Badger was great because he designed, game plans to play against the Oilers. You'd have your own system and style, but against the Oilers, you had to play them. Our system and style probably wasn't good head to head. They had so many great players.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, how are we going to beat them? Here's how we need to do it. And over the years, we had very competitive games against them, competitive series. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but we did fairly well against them. Obviously the playoff time, a little bit different, but Edmonton had an unbelievable team. I mean, they won 5 Stanley Cups. They had probably 5 of the 7 greatest players, in the world at that time. And I think that probably they had the most underrated player too in Grant Fuhr.
Yeah.
I thought he was a difference in a lot of games. Even if the game was 7-6, he'd make that 7th save, or that 8th save, whatever it is, to stop that 7th or 8th goal. Not the 7th or 8th save, but we'd have like 50 shots, and he'd make that one big save.
Right. As someone who was tasked at times with trying to shut down that offense and try to shut down Gretzky, can you equate what Connor McDavid's done this year to what Gretzky was able to do in those years?
Yeah, when you look at them, they're both great players. Yeah. The game was different back in the day than it is now. There's a lot of hooking and holding back in the day. A lot of, you still had the 2-line offside. So those things made a difference. You still had the automatic offside too, going over the blue line. So those things, probably impeded Gretzky to get more points, because if you think of him now, being able to be in his own end, get the puck and fire it up to a flying Yari Curry, who's right by the blue line, or Glenn Anderson, or whoever it was, the far blue line, boy,
that's a really good point. I don't know if we take, because there's been a lot of conversation about McDavid's season versus Gretzky's best season, and that is a rather significant ability, right?
Yeah, and then you look at overtime, and we didn't get overtime until I don't know what year it was, and it was 5-on-5.
It was overtime. 5-on-5.
Yeah, it wasn't 3-on-3. So I can only imagine Gretzky, 3-on-3. I remember when he retired. Obviously a huge time in sporting, and my buddies, my phone was lighting up. Like, I got probably 5 or 6 calls from my buddies. So finally I answer one. My one buddy goes, "Hey, you're all over the news." I go, well, finally, what's going on? They go, "They're showing Gretzky's highlight goals."
Oh no.
Yeah, so there I am reaching
Oh,
in.
no.
I'm like, oh man. But we played against him so much,
Yeah.
and he was a fantastic player. Just his hockey IQ
Mhm.
was, beyond anybody, in my mind that has played the game. Was he the fastest skater? No. Do you have the fastest or hardest shot? No, but he was accurate. He was the best passer, and he knew the game. People always said, why don't you hit him in open ice? Well, it's tough to hit a guy in open ice. He was probably the best lateral
Yeah.
mover in the game at that time too. And people go, well, run him in the corner. Well, he's not in the corners.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
isn't his game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if he's behind the net, well, you can chase him behind the net, and you'll look like an idiot again. You'll end up on a highlight reel, which a few of those, and then you learn. You got to sort of contain him and contain the guys that he's passing to.
Right. If because we always do the bring it forward. If we brought Gretzky into today's game, what would happen? If we moved McDavid back, is he more like Gretzky or is he more like Messier in the sense of, because he's a bigger guy who can skate, right?
Yeah, I think he's probably, in between the two,
Okay.
if you moved him back in that
Yeah.
era. But I mean, his speed is tremendous now.
Right.
If you had that same speed then, well, but I think that if you look
He was
at,
more like Coffee that way. Right?
yeah. Oh, just such a smooth skater. And
Yeah.
you look at, Paul Coffey, one of the greatest defensemen ever to play the game. I mean, they had, Messier, Gretzky, Curry, Coffey, Anderson,
Yep.
and then add in Grant Fuhrer. And then add in the host of other players that they had, that they were really good. They had such a good core group of players, probably about 12 or 13 of them. And then they do a fantastic job of augmenting those players too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just been a lot of conversation this year, not to take anything away from McDavid, because he does look like he's on a mission, but there were a couple of those Gretzky seasons where, you just shake your head, right?
Yeah. Well, and you look at, McDavid now, and you go, when you look at Gretzky, Gretzky had as we talked about, those 4 other players that were all-star players. I mean, he's got Draisaitl, who is world class.
Absolutely.
Beyond that, they've got some good players, but not, that you don't have 2 Draisaitl's or 3 Draisaitl's.
But I don't think you could have that anymore.
No, I mean, it's tough to do that,
right?
But I look at, you look at Colorado, and they've got 3 or 4 really, standout players too.
But I believe McKinnon's going to do a new contract at some point.
Yeah.
Right?
And that will all change, I'm sure.
Yeah. That's, everybody talks about the goaltending or the equipment and stuff. It's the salary cap, really, right? What would that have done?
Yeah. And it's interesting, if you could have kept, a bunch of teams together over that time. Right. And, when you think of now, and you think of guys leaving because they're getting more money, which that's all great. And that's what they've worked towards. But as a team, you have to plan, hey, we got to win it in this time frame, or we're losing guys.
Am I wrong? But weren't your Stanley Cup version of your team, wasn't it one of the highest paid teams at the time?
I don't know if it was the highest paid. It certainly wasn't to me. No, I think, I know that people talk about the salaries, and, ours was, I think our whole team was, 4.5 million, 5 million. It was in around there.
It's kind of mind numbing to think about it now.
My 130 Canadian hit home on that pretty good. But I think that was probably actually Canadian dollars too, because we used to get paid. If you signed a contract in Canadian dollars, that's what it was in.
Right.
Now everybody's signing in US dollars. But, if you got traded from the US to Canada, it would just, you'd add the factor and go that way. But if you got traded from the US to Canada, or Canada to the US, you would get your face value in US dollars. So if you were making 150 Canadian, you get traded US, you're making 150 US.
Holy cow.
So it was quite a thing when you got
bonus.
Traded. Yeah, it was a huge bonus.
Absolutely. The current version of your former club remains somewhat of an enigma wrapped in a riddle. Do you have any insight to what we have seen here this year, or what we saw on Saturday, or game to game? It's almost incredible. It's almost funny if it wasn't tragic.
Yeah, I think, I look at it and I go, you can't put your finger on any one thing. I think there's a lot of multiple things that have happened to the team. And, they haven't found the chemistry that they had the last couple of years. And I think last year was a career year for everybody. And then there's the changes that happen over the summer. But on paper, what they brought in, I thought they were going to be a better team.
Yep, I
I
did
truly
too.
thought they were going to be a better
too.
team. I think everybody did, but it's an adjustment period, no question. Adjustment for coming in a new city, new weather for
Yeah.
the guys in Florida,
Yep.
the pressure of the Canadian press, which is huge. The factor of going out and being noticed, the thing of opening the newspaper or going online and you're watching TV and
Yep.
and hockey's a big thing. It's not football, it's not basketball, it's not baseball, it's not college sports. It's Calgary Flames, and then you add in the coaching and new style and the way the team plays, and so there is a bunch of adjustment. And if you don't get that chemistry right sort of at the start, I shouldn't say just at the start, but tinkering with it to get it so that's at the right point. And and it's tough because I look at probably the last 5 or 7 games, their fourth line's been their best line.
Yeah.
And I go, well, your fourth line can't be your best line unless you move it up to the third line, the second line, and first line. And a lot of times when you get, the fourth line is your best line and you're playing them like your first line, well, those guys aren't used to playing the minutes that you take to be on a first line. So, yeah, it's quite interesting. It's, disappointing in a way, but they're still not out of it. That's the amazing part, is that even after the Vancouver game, which is so,
right,
disappointing, the Chicago game was more disappointing, but they've got to, in their mind, they got to go, we got to come out and just hammer the team. I mean, they did it to the Ducks in Anaheim, where they came out and blitzed them, right?
Yeah.
That's what they have to do against these lower teams, and just say, hey, you don't have a chance. But the longer a team stays in it, the more chance they have of actually winning and, getting a lucky bounce or a lucky goal. And, all of a sudden they're up. And watching that Vancouver game, the first period they just didn't come out like they should. And unfortunately, Jacob Markstrom's had, a couple of games where that first or second shot goes in, which is tough on a team. But on the other side, I mean, the best defense is always offensive forecheck, and you got to get the puck in. You got to have guys who, are starting the game and know what they're doing. And, they want to create and set a tone to it.
Yeah.
And we, watching a few games, you just haven't felt that. And yeah, it's disappointing, but I also go now, I go, don't count Winnipeg out of losing 3 games here. They haven't been the best team ever.
No,
they could easily lose. They've got 2 tough games coming up. They got probably an easier one tonight against San Jose. But, once again, if you think it's going to be easy.
Well, they got shut out by San Jose a week ago, right?
Yeah.
So it can happen. Couple of theories that I want to run by you, because you would have more insight than I. The Chicago game last week, in which they just didn't have it. Would you get exhausted as a player if you were it's every game's a game 7, every game you got to win, you got to win, you got to win. I just wonder about the mental fatigue, and they just look like it. I don't think it wasn't that they didn't care, and Nazem Kadri didn't care, but Nazem Kadri coughed up the puck a lot. Do you get tired when you're chasing like this?
I think there's 2 things. One is, you shouldn't be tired. But I think you get caught up in, and we got caught up in the same thing in the day, was Edmonton, and they were getting caught up in Winnipeg. And sometimes you lose sight of what's truly in front of you is to get to that game against, back in the day, Edmonton, but to get to that game against Winnipeg. And I don't think the team, really focused enough on beating Chicago. Let's just, at this point, you take it 1 game at a time, 1 shift at a time. I mean, it's cliche-ish, but it's true. 1 shift, 1 period, 1 game, then you worry about the next one.
Right.
But there was so much, hype about, the biggest game of the season is going to be the game against Winnipeg. That's going to decide it. And you know what? It isn't. The biggest game of the season at that time was against Chicago. And then, then the next night against Winnipeg. So, you end up losing to Chicago, but you beat Winnipeg, and you're still, outside looking in.
Right.
Because you don't beat Vancouver. And, there's a lot of things that go into the mental preparation of it, but they need to be focused every game.
Yeah.
And, it can happen. Believe me, it can happen. You can have bad games, but it's up to, the coach too, to say, hey, this guy might not be having his best game tonight, but Walker Dewar and Lucic and Lewis are, so I'm going to play them a little more than I'm going to play the guys who are, the first, second, or third line. And I think that's probably, sometimes what happens is, you go back to the guys who you think have brought you to the well, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think, for me as a, sort of marginal player in the game, I had great nights. And if the coach couldn't recognize my great nights, then they were sort of wasted, right?
Yeah.
Because at any
Yeah.
night you could
Yeah,
be the
yeah.
best player on the ice.
Sure.
And if you get played like that, then you know what? Well, that, the team's going to benefit from that.
Are you surprised at all about that he has stayed so consistent the last couple of weeks in his lineup?
No, I think once I mean, they were on a bit of a winning streak, and then he did change it. And so I think it's tough to say, well, let's throw in a, Coronado or,
or Pelche.
Pelche. And, because one thing is, yeah, it sounds great. Well, they should throw him in. But if you lose, then, it's their fault.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't want that especially for young players.
Yeah. Are you confident in Markstrom coming back next year?
You know what? I think it's a different year. Last year he was fantastic. This year, probably average year. So yeah, you hope next year he's coming back and he's going to be great. But this year's not over yet, right? So
no, it's not. And I don't.
Yeah.
There's still 2 games to be played. And the reason I asked that question is, you would have seen that too. I mean, the guy you mentioned, Grant Fuhr, at parts of his career was outplayed by Andy Moog.
Yeah.
Vern was really good in 86 and excellent in 89. There's ups and downs with goalies. I just don't know when that tipping point comes, right?
Yeah. And I don't know when the tipping point comes either, but once again, Lador was playing really well.
Yeah.
So my thing is, don't look at what you're paying guys, because you're paying the whole team, right? It's like, we got to win. And here's here's what we're paying guys. So don't play guys by how you pay them. Right. That's a good lesson for any coach in the league. You play who's playing well. And if you can play who's playing well, and if you've got 2 goalies that are, one guy might not be playing great, the other guy is, you go with the guy who is. And I don't care if that's a 5-game run or a 10-game run, whatever it is, you're going with them. And then you put the other guy in, because it's tough as a player when you go, hey, I'm playing great, but they're going to let the other guy play because he's, he's a first-round draft choice, or he's, the highest paid guy, or he's a number 1 goalie.
Right.
So I truly believe, you got to go with the guy who's on a roll, especially in net.
The other one that I want to pick your brain on is not having a captain. I think it's insane.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
I think you need a leader. You need a leader for a lot of different reasons. And, we had tons of leaders on those teams that I played on in the 80s.
You had 3 captains.
We had 3 captains, and then we had, obviously Lanny and Pep, 2 great captains. And you go, we had guys that would go talk to the coach, that represent the team, and the coach, dealt with them on whatever was going on. And, for the media, for, the luncheons we used to have, all those things. I mean, it sounds really small, but it's big in the grand scheme of things. And, when you have just assistant captains, and every other team in the league in almost every other sport too now has a captain.
Yeah.
And we're the only team that doesn't. We haven't had one for 2 years. So, are you telling me that, maybe there isn't that leadership in the room? Well, I think there is. I think that there's probably about 3 or 4 guys you'd say, hey, you're putting the C on, and let's go, and you're in charge. And, that I believe that there should be a captain.
Yeah, and to his credit, Darryl talks a lot about the leadership group, and I think we know who's in that. We know Tanev and Coleman and Lindholm and Anderson and Backlund. But I do know, again, not the coach, so I don't get to make the decision. I don't know why Michael Backlund hasn't worn the C for the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I go, so you say, well, that leadership group, are you calling that leadership group in? Does the leadership group get together and everybody comes in to talk to the coach, or is the coach just taking one player and talking to him? I don't know. And that's why, I'm not on that inside of the game. So I don't know, but I know traditionally that's what your captain has done. Your captain's a guy, he's a leader, he's compassionate. He works with, guys who are feeling down, who, to the guys who are playing great, to, helping whatever the team needs from the coaches or from the organization.
Yeah. I don't think it's the be all end all. It's just,
no, it's
I think at the end of this year, and you know, you've been here for a lot of them. I've been here for, 20 of them now. It feels like there's going to be a whole bunch of questions this year, not necessarily in the way of, why didn't you do this? More of, well, why, what happened here?
Yeah.
Right.
And as you said, because we all looked at it and said, they're a better team on paper.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is it out of the realm of possibility that this team would come back next year and perform to the level that it should?
Well, I mean, it very well could, but I'm sure there's going to be some
There's
changes.
Always change, yeah.
And there always will be changes, right? So, you just hope that the changes aren't massive like they were last year. Like, and nobody was counting on, 2 giant changes last year. I think,
no, that's true.
One
triggered the other.
One triggered the other, and and I mean, it happened, and so that changes your whole outlook of your team and your organization. But we brought in, 3 quality players for those 2 guys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you would have done individual trades, you said 3 for 2, you probably would have done that, or been very close to it. I know there was some draft choices included, but so I personally thought they were way better, and that's what's going to be discussed after, why this, why that, why that.
What, completely unrelated, but when you look at an offseason of change, what was the story, or what was the transition like between Bob and Terry when you went, you went from a coaching legend to another guy who came in and, ends up getting the cup, right?
Yeah. I mean, it takes time because, no matter who you're coaching or what you're coaching, you have some favorites that you like, and kids that, I can put them on here, and, players you put on here. So there's that adjustment period. There's adjustment period for the style of game we were playing, for the way that, Badger coach versus Crispy, you went from an X's and O guy, to high energy guy. So that was, it was a big change, and you adjust to it. Either you adjust or you phase out, you're gone.
Yeah.
And, back in the day, the coach probably had, I don't know, they would change players out before they change the coach. You look at the longevity of the coaches over that time, probably 5 years was an average, 3 to 5 years. Now you look at it, it's probably 2 to 3 years.
Well, around here it is.
Yeah.
I mean, because 401 games is not a lot of games.
Yeah.
When you think about it. John Cooper's been in Tampa Bay for 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I'd be interested, and I don't know this stat, how many, coaches Michael Bachman's had as a Flame. He's played 900 and some games.
Well, he would have had Brent, and then he would have had Bob, and then he would have had Glenn, and then he would have had Bill, and then he would have had Jeff, and now he's had Daryl.
Yeah.
And Daryl drafted him too. Let's throw that one in there. I feel like I'm missing one in that group.
It feels like, but I go, that's 8 or 9 guys, right? Or 7 or 8,
yeah,
whatever it is.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of different coaches to adjust your style, which speaks to the longevity and what a great player Michael Bachman is and how coachable he is.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I also wonder a little bit about the John Cooper part.
Yeah.
Because I've opined on this, and I'd love to run it off you. I look at John Cooper and I go, I wonder how much that is the leadership core of that team, that he doesn't have to be the bad guy. The captains take care of the bad stuff.
Yeah. And I think, when you have longevity, what the coach wants.
Yeah.
What the organization wants.
But then the leaders know that.
The leaders know that. So when you go, hey, you know what? Don't do this because the coach is not going to like this.
Yeah.
Whether you think it's a great idea or not, the coach is not going to like this. So I wouldn't do that. And if the player does that, then, typically guys are talking to him again. And then once the coach talks to him, it's typically, my way or the highway. But when you've got coaches changing every year, it's tough to play for that.
Sure it is.
And if you're looking at grabbing free agents, you're a free agent. You like the coach they have now, and then in a year and a half, the guy's gone, and all of a sudden the new coach comes in, and you're going, boy, I might not fit his style, or he might not like me, or there's all those things where you go, if you're a team that has, a John Cooper, for example, you go, I like him. I know he's going to be around.
Yeah,
I'll go there.
Well, you also know what the expectations
is too. Yeah,
right, 100%. Let's transition a little bit because you are wearing the black hat of the Calgary Flames alumni, which is not appropriate at all, right?
No, but it's a
But
hat.
it's a hat. Let's talk a little bit about the work of the alumni, which continues to be very, very busy. I believe we were really close to handing out adapted bikes, are we not?
We are. That's next weekend. That's next
Okay.
Saturday, or this Saturday coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about
So
that.
it's the CP Kids and Family Adaptive Bike Program, and what we do is kids with cerebral palsy. We help raise money so that they can get bikes that they can adapt to each child's particular situation.
Yeah.
Whatever their need is, the bikes are adapted to that. And over the years, I think we've probably supported about 1,000 bikes. So that's 1,000 kids that get to ride a bike, for whether it's the first time or they get to continue riding a bike, continue to be able to be part of a family, of their family, and do stuff with their family or do stuff with their friends. And that's so important.
It is, absolutely.
And it's one of our best days. When you raise money for stuff, it's great. It's really good. But when you can see your money going in action and helping people and seeing their results and the response from it, it's pretty amazing. From the kids are so excited, but the parents are so excited too.
Yeah.
And the bikes are, as I said, they're adapted for every particular need for the child. So not one fits all.
No.
And there's I don't know all the terminology, but when you sit back and you go to these fittings and they go, well, we need to adjust the bike for this particular child, and then they can reuse another bike. But these bikes are, I think they're $1,500
easily
each.
Yeah.
$1,500 to $2,000 each to retrofit and adapt these bikes. But it's a great program. We raise money for them through our golf tournament, which we call the Masters. Different than the one that was just on.
I don't think that different.
But yeah, so we raise great money for them, and our guys are committed to the program.
Yeah.
So we're doing a bike fitting on Saturday, this coming Saturday.
What I like the most about it is now they're very common around town, right? That it's not, you can drive or be down in Fish Creek or wherever, and you're going to see a child on a bike that is part of that program, That's the best part, right? Now, because you've been doing it, there's some longevity, there's some turnover, there's, it's part of just being in Calgary on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, you're going to run into one.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. And on that too is, there are the Special Olympics, that we support. You see the Special Olympians around town with some Flames alumni jackets on.
That's
you,
right.
And you go, you're having an impact.
Absolutely. And with the 2024 Canada Winter Games here next year, I imagine going to be really busy too.
I think it will.
Yeah. Another program that I'm really excited. Well, I got the puck, right?
Oh, yeah, right
It's
there.
second year in a row that you'll be teaming with Hockey Calgary for I like it because it's a pathway to participation. A bunch of kids that got an opportunity to get equipment and try hockey. Now you're going to get them on the ice. And what's the best part about this, Patter, is that it's right before a hockey registration. So it really gives the families a good opportunity to see what it's all about.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it is before that. And it does give, a lot of different kids the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And the guys get back out and get to coach a little bit.
Yeah. And that's, whether that's good or bad, we'll find out.
that remains to be seen. And then reverse, I'll just give you a quick update. I was at the Dungeon Wrestling event on Friday with the Kelms. So Noah, the goalie, and Ty were there. I do have to let you know that Noah went after a manager in a wheelchair who's part of the one of the events. He started, and Noah, who, as we know, at times won't say a whole lot, really started beaking off this manager. And then Ty, who I believe you and I have maybe heard a combined 20 words from, got very upset when one of the villains was using a foreign object and was screaming at the referee to open his eyes. So I thought that I knew you were coming in. I wanted to share that. That's a little off-season superheroes update for you.
Those two brothers, they stick together.
Yes, they were raising hell at wrestling on Friday, so it was a whole lot of fun. But we should point out that and congratulate the alumni further supporting superheroes with a significant donation this past week.
Yeah, we donated $15,000 to the superheroes program, and Rob, we can talk about it, superheroes all day long. I mean, it's such a great program. Helps kids that have between autism and Down syndrome and everything in between play hockey, and it's been going on for 8 years, and it's every Sunday. There's 3 ice times at Max Bell. there was 23 sessions this year, 23 days
On ice. Yeah.
yeah, and we had 20 different alumni
Yep.
participate. Some guys obviously more than once, but
Well,
it's pretty
yeah,
special.
that would be you.
Well, there's a couple of us.
And Zach Smith, really, he threw his name in there.
Yeah, and what I mean. So it's really neat to see that program because all the kids want to do is learn how to play hockey. They want to be part of a team, and the parents want to be part of a team. And when I look at the teams that we have 3 different ice times, and each one of them has a makeup of any team I've ever played on. You got a guy who's funny, you got a real good player, you got somebody with great hands, you've got the one who doesn't talk much, and so it's really neat to see the makeup of the team, and the kids just love it. They come out and they have such amazing time. But we wrapped it up this year with the game against the alumni, and we had the alumni, and then we had 3 girls from the Mount Royal team
who just won
the Canadian championship, and it was really neat. The kids, they played. That was the most energy I've seen, and the best they've skated. Every one of them. It wasn't just one kid; it was every kid. They were so excited.
I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity. And had I known I was going to do this, I probably would have grabbed a photo for Gav to put up. But I just want to talk about the relationship that you've created with one of our young players, Grayson, who has gotten over the last 3 years or 4 years, I guess. You and Grayson have created this connection. And to me, I say this all the time, and I hope you appreciate it as a former NHLer. Hockey is not a static thing. Hockey is whatever the person needs it to be. And you've created this environment for Grayson where we never thought he would. His dad was the only dad that was allowed to be on the ice in the program, just because that was and now his dad is a hockey parent in the stands. That's got to be a unique experience for you.
It was, and it was a great experience. It was tough, let me tell you. I thought it would take a couple of weeks, and it ended up taking about 2 years of constantly being with him out in the ice. And then and for me, I had a knee surgery in January, so I couldn't be on the ice, as you will know. And so when I got back out for that alumni game, I think he was mad at me. He was like, "Where you been? Don't use the knee as an excuse."
Well, we should put we should put out just put it out there too, that unbeknownst to us, you and Grayson were skating on your own too.
Yes, yeah. So it's been great. He's a great little guy, and you know what? I hope he continues playing. And that's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing, right?
Like any child that you coach, throughout the years, you just hope they keep playing.
Yeah.
It's funny. I ran into a young guy that, he's now 30, which still is very young to me. He played with my son, and I coached him.
Yeah.
And I said, "Are you still playing?" He goes, "No, I'm not." I said, "Well, you got to get back into it." Because that's why we coach. You coach people. It's not to play in the NHL. It's not to play junior hockey. We all end up in the same league.
Yep.
It's, whether you want to call it old timer hockey or the beer league, that's where we end up. And I always felt that as a coach, I wanted to make the game and teach kids so that they could play, forever.
Sport for life.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you understand, how to skate, maybe a little bit of stick handling, how to shoot, and where to go on the ice, you can play a long time.
Yeah. And I think if anything, it's also about that camaraderie, right?
Yeah.
It's about being part of something. And we see that every Sunday. The power of that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and as such as the superheroes program, just heartwarming, but it's just a fabulous program.
Yeah.
Really fabulous.
Well, we're lucky to have you.
Oh,
okay. To wind down here, this is a week in which the NHL season is winding down. And part of that is bonuses. There might be some players trying to get bonuses. Can you share with me your story? Because you had, you played on a really effective line, at the height of the best Flames era. And you also were eligible for bonuses. Can you tell us the story about your plus minus bonus?
Yeah. So I'll take it back to my first contract where I had a bonus. If I scored 50 goals, I'd get 50,000. Nobody told me it had to be in the same year. So, once I came up for my next contract, and I did my own contract, and, looking at individual bonuses, you just went, well, what really applies to me? And one that did was plus minus. So I worked with Cliff Fletcher over the years, plus minus, and, it started, top in the league, the team, and then, worked its way down to, probably the top 5.
Right.
And so this particular year you're talking about in 1989, I was playing on a line with Doug Gilmore and Joe Mullen, and
Not
we
bad.
had a pretty good line.
Yeah.
Yeah. And going into the final game, I was plus 46. Joe was plus 48, and Doug Gilmore was, I think, plus 46 as well. And I had a bonus for top in the league, second in the league, and third in the league. So I was 10,000 if I got first, 7,500 if I was second,
Okay.
5,000 if I'm third.
Okay.
On the team, I had the same amounts.
Okay.
So I'm going, man, I'm too behind Joe Mullen. I said, if I can somehow work my changes and, jump out if we score and try and get my number in there, which, worked previously. I'm going, I might be able to at least tie him. And if I'm tied, I'm getting that. And then, if I come second, I mean, that's, so if I come first, it's 20,000. Come second, it's 15. Third, because there was nobody else in the league that was close to us, nobody else in the team.
Right.
So comes down, we're playing the Oilers. I take a penalty, and I'm sitting in the penalty box, and they put Joe Mullen and Doug Gilmore out to kill the penalty. I go, they really never kill penalties a whole lot. Well, don't they go down and score? And they get a plus.
Yeah.
So now I go, okay, he's 46, now Doug's 47 47, Molly's 49 now, and I'm still at 46. My penalty ends, and I swear to God, the door opens, I put my foot on the ice. Edmonton scores, which is a minus for me. I pick my foot up. I try and get back in the penalty box, but remember old Bert in the penalty box? He's shutting the door. You gotta get out there. I can't get out there. So now I gotta, the skate of shame over to the bench. So now I'm plus 45, and then those guys. And so then we get a, we're playing and our line's up. Well, Gary Roberts and I are changing for each other. Well, he doesn't come off, but Hokenlube and Doug Gilmore, or Hokenlube and Newey come off, and so Mullen and Doug Gilmore, sure enough, they score. I'm like, Gary Roberts comes off and go, what the frick, and he's like, well, what do you mean? I just, I'm out there, and so needless to say, I end up third. And I always say I cost, it was the $10,000 penalty it cost me, because instead of, getting that 10 grand, or, I ended up with 5 and 5 in each. So when I look at it, it was 5-5, and, I missed out on the other 5. So, it was a $10,000 penalty, just killed me. And so afterwards I told Molly the story. He goes, well, why didn't you tell me,
Oh yeah. They would have helped for sure. Right?
Yeah.
One last one for you was last week. Peter Marr was mentioning it that Hokenlube scored 50. It was the anniversary of that. Only Swedish player ever to score 50, which
it's crazy.
Peter Forsberg hasn't done it. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You played with him. I always found him to be just a really neat guy. Like, the Magic Man, Kent Nielsen, was aloof, and, some of the Europeans were, it's different for them. What was Lube like?
Luber was just a great guy. He was a real competitor too.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a hard worker. He was, the Swedes at the time would always get, they're soft.
Yeah.
He was a tough little guy. And he was a team player. He wasn't worried about his stats. He was more about the team. And he was a great team player and a great guy. He embraced being over here.
Mm-hmm.
Where some players back in the day were like, well, I don't really want to know if I want to be in North America.
Yeah.
But, he embraced it and did it. And just a fabulous person. Like, just, beyond the hockey, just a fabulous guy. And, so many, great memories of him. But I remember we were playing Philadelphia, and they had Glenn Cochran.
Sure.
He was a big guy, like a huge guy, and he had this big beard, and he must have done something to Luber. Luber got on the bench and was like, something caveman, and he just looked over, and I was like, I was right beside Luber, and I'm going, I didn't want to say, hey, it was him who said it wasn't me. But like, oh my goodness. And then, do you remember the Larmers? They had Jeff and Steve Larmer.
Yeah.
And he goes, we were sitting in the dressing room. He goes, I don't like that Slarmer. And we're like, Slarmer? Who's that? That guy in their team, Slarmer. And we go, Steve Larmer. Because that's Slarmer.
Yeah.
But Luber was a great guy and a fabulous player. And, you know, and his skating style was, you know, I mean, it's just so smooth and, you know, pushing outside the side. Really learned a lot from just watching him skate. But he was a great guy. And, you know, when we look at the team that we had in '89 and you talk about changes, you know, you lose Lanny, you lose Luber, you know, those things really hurt you because, you know, although you replace them with guys, it's not the same.
Yeah. And then the next year you go to Russia and the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
That didn't help.
No, it didn't help. And I mean, I think we were sold a bit of a bill of goods too, that we wouldn't, you know, practice or we wouldn't play, you know, until a week after we got home because it was exhibition. And sure enough, you know, you get home and then, you know, oh, we need these guys to play. You got to play. You got to play. You got to play. And it was, you know, it wasn't as it was organized. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't as efficient as they have the system now for going over and playing in Europe.
You probably both teams weren't on the same charter plane. With lay down. Pods or whatever.
Nothing. No, there wasn't any of that.
The only, if I remember correctly, the only thing that was really redeeming about that trip was the Czech part.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was. I mean, it was a great trip. Don't get me wrong. It was a great experience, but you know, to come back and have to play right away, it was tiring.
Would you like to go to Australia? Because apparently,
I would. Yeah,
they're going to Australia now.
Yeah, they probably need me to go down there now, help set up or something. Get the guys, make sure they get the good coffee places.
I got to be honest with you. That when that came up, I was like, I never thought I would hear the day.
Yeah, but I mean, it's about, you know, promoting the sport, moving the sport around, you know, China. I mean, lots of different things. So I go when.
Did you go to China with?
We went over to Beijing years before to help sort of seed things and
run a few clinics. Wasn't Rob Ramage or no Barry Beck?
Yeah, Barry Beck was there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, running their hockey program. But yeah, I would love to go to Australia. You know, there's a place in Australia that has these lattes in donuts. So I'm like, that's perfect for me. It fits right in.
I don't know why we haven't to this point. Clearly,
I know. I'm going to start working on that when I get home. Actually.
Lattes in donuts.
Yeah.
Are you sure there's nothing in Marta Loop that does that?
Well, that's what I'm looking at. You know, there should be. I mean, there's a lot of great places here.
Thanks, pal. This was fun.
Oh, Rob, always a pleasure.
There you go, everybody. Colin Patterson from the Flames alumni, '89 Stanley Cup champion, and as we found out, $10,000 a little lighter in the wallet,
which I could have turned into a lot more.
That would have been it. Yeah, it would have put you over the top.